and the meeting is officially being called to order at 6:35. So, good evening, everyone. I'm Rashida Hilliard. I'm the chair of the Housing Committee. And online, we have Jessica Sosa, who is the co-chair, and Brittany Reynoso. So that's all I have to say about that right now. As a community board committee, we loosely follow Robert's Rules of Order. We will be following the agenda that was previously distributed. So if you're in-house, then you have the agenda. And Todd, if you're online, perhaps the agenda was emailed to you.
It was, yep, thank you.
No problem. Basically, if we open a topic to general discussion, we ask that if you would like to speak, that you raise your hand, and I or even Jessica will call on you. Sometimes if we have a lot of people online, then we try to both monitor. Our goal is to have a good discussion and get through our agenda items. However, if we have many people who would like to speak on any individual topic, you may only get to speak once, so make it count. Of course, that's just theoretical. Obviously, if there are fewer people, then you can speak more than once. If you're on Zoom and you would like to speak, then you can raise your hand, and you know those reactions are at the bottom. If you're on the phone, you can press *6 to mute and unmute, and *9 to raise your hand. And so with that said, I will move along with the agenda items. So first and foremost, I will do roll call. Just for everyone who is here, some of our committee members are online, and I basically, well, we'll just do roll call, and I'll just say online, although it really doesn't matter. Okay, so roll call. Rashida Hilliard here, Brittany Reynoso.
Brittany, unmute.
*6.
Hey, so sorry, girls. What happened?
Roll call.
Oh, present.
So I'm just gonna say online. So if you're marked absent, it's because we know we have this rule that if you don't have 8-day approval, then you're absent. But you can, if there's a situation with weather and such things, if the community board didn't call it, then you can still be online, but it'll just say absent but online, so you can still participate in the conversation. And that's important to me. Jessica Sosa.
Here.
Ingrid De Leon, absent, and Richard Perez, absent. He mentioned I wouldn't be here. So now we're just going to move on. I'm going to skip over the approval of the minutes because we all have to be in person to approve them, but these minutes were from April 27th, and we can approve them at our next meeting in September. So without further ado, I would like to move on to item number 4 on the agenda, which is the discussion with our Bronx Community Land Trust representative, Todd Baker. And just to give you a little bit, I know you're going to speak, but just to give a little bit of background information, our Bronx was formerly known as the Northwest Bronx Community and Clergy Coalition. Also known as NWBCCC. And it's a 5,000 plus member grassroots organization that fights for racial justice and economic democracy across the borough. They combine community organizing, planning, and economic development to tackle issues like tenant protection, land ownership, and equitable development. And we did have a guest speaker come, I want to say maybe last cycle, to speak about TOPA, a little bit about TOPA and NYB, Northwest Bronx, NYBCCC, before the name changed. And so we're happy to have a representative come back again today. And that representative is Todd Baker. So with that being said, I know you had questions that were given to you beforehand, but I'm going to turn it over to you, Todd, so that you can speak a little bit. And if you need me to
yeah, thank you. I can give like a little bit of background and context, and then we'll dive into the questions if that works. And just so I know, I see the agenda, but about how long should I plan to be speaking with you all tonight?
I mean, it's up to you're the main person.
Well,
10 minutes.
Like one,
you said
10
10
minute
minutes?
10-minute intervals. Yeah.
Great. I love it. I can do that. Okay, so my name is Todd Baker. I'm the project manager at Our Bronx. As you guys seem to know, we're formerly the Northwest Bronx Community and Clergy Coalition. If everybody got our initials like you did, we never would have had to rebrand. But Our Bronx is a 52-year-old community organizing institution. We're founded in the Northwest Bronx, though we recently made the transition to kind of go Bronx-wide and serve the entire borough. The organization does community organizing with Bronx residents and Bronx institutions across a range of issues, including housing, health. You may have followed our work recently with the redevelopment of the Kingsbridge Armory, economic development broadly, and then we have a youth organizing arm as well, though that's a little bit dormant at the moment. And I'll be focusing primarily on the housing and the community land trust piece tonight, but I can speak to the other pieces as they kind of come in, or if you have questions, I can do my best to answer them or loop in, the more appropriate party. So I'll start by saying that, and just to kind of clarify between Our Bronx and the Bronx Community Land Trust, housing has always been one of our core issues. We have helped tenants form tenant associations in order to demand repairs and other kind of accountability from their landlord, rent reductions, heat and hot water, any kind of violation issues that need to be addressed, the kind of things that you probably have had folks reach out to your community board about. But about 10 or so years ago, we went through a strategic planning process and made the assessment that we kept having to fight the same battles over and over again. You go into a building, you form a tenant association, they have a press conference, and the landlord fixes the elevator. And then 7 years later, the elevator is broken again, and you have to go back to the building, and you have to have another. So it's like the underlying model was not working. And we still believe in the organizing, but as we put it, we're no longer just fighting back, we're fighting forward. And that was when we kind of made a shift to really emphasize community ownership and to really do whatever we could to organize housing so that residents are either become the owners or have some mechanism to have oversight and input on how their housing is run. And that was when we incorporated the Community Land Trust in 2020. And that came out of, there's community land trust. Sorry, just to clarify, are folks at all familiar with the community land trust model? Is it totally new?
Let's
Vaguely
go totally new. Just this is the first time you're at the housing meeting,
Totally.
and this is getting recorded, so it could be a resource to other people online.
That's perfect. Well, so a community land trust, I won't spend a super long time on because we could do a whole hour training on that. But a community land trust is a community organization which owns and stewards land to ensure that that land is used for the benefit of the whole community. So the way it works is that the building is owned by the owner. That might be, if it's a single family home, I, Todd, own my one family brick house. I don't. I'm in an apartment right now, but imagine that would be cool, right? But the community land trust owns the land underneath the building, and those enter what's called a ground lease, and that ground lease dictates that the building must remain affordable if it's housing. Community land trusts can also be used for other things. They can be used for farmland, they can be used for commercial space, they can be used for, to keep small businesses in your neighborhood, to keep the business space affordable. But it's a way that a board made up of community leaders, residents of that building, and people who have knowledge in affordable housing or have a professional experience come together to make sure that housing serves the whole community. And what does serves the community typically mean? It means it's affordable, right? The number one thing is, can the local community actually afford the housing? And two, is it being well maintained? Is it dignified, safe, quality housing? So the Community Land Trust is kind of a tool. We think of it as Our Bronx is the organization, and the Bronx CLT, you'll hear me say CLT for Community Land Trust, is a tool in our toolbox. So when we go and organize housing, we can now transfer that housing onto the Community Land Trust to ensure it stays affordable, well-maintained, and resident governed permanently, forever. One of the reasons this started is that the city, their affordability rules were typically maybe 20 years, maybe 30 years. Now, a lot of them are 40 years in a regulatory agreement. But even so, we're seeing across the Bronx that a lot of those regulatory agreements are now expiring, and we don't know what's going to happen to those buildings. They may well become unaffordable. So a community land trust ensures it's permanently affordable forever. That was when we incorporated the CLT. Our CLT pipeline today, 6 years later, includes one new construction project that's in Community Board 6. That's 4 sites. We're developing 37 cooperatively owned units across 4 sites. And then we are also working with 2 occupied buildings, one of which I have to look at the exact borders, I believe is in Community Board 8 on Davidson Avenue. This was a pretty newsworthy experience that we had and really exemplified the kind of work that the Community Land Trust is trying to do. We had been organizing, that story I told about the elevator breaking is real. It's from that building, right? And that was a building where finally we were able to get the city to move the building through what's called the third-party transfer program, a now defunct housing program, which would take property away from negligent landlords and then either pass it to a responsible landlord or actually pass it to the tenants. And that's what we're trying to do at 2205 Davidson Avenue, is actually hand the building over to cooperative ownership by the tenants on the community land trust. We think that the community land trust is a really important partner, especially to co-op housing. You maybe have heard about HDFCs in the Bronx, or housing development fund corporations, low-income co-ops, a lot of which are having a hard time now because they were buildings that were, our assessment is those are not struggling because co-op housing doesn't work. And they're really not struggling because the people in them are not fit to be homeowners, which is this racist myth that we hear about people in the Bronx, right? That they're not ready for home ownership or equipped to be homeowners. It's because they were given no training, no resources, and no preparation. They were just handed buildings in terrible condition, and the city said, good luck, here's the keys. And that obviously maybe does not go well over time, or it starts off going well, but if anything falls out of place, it's not hard for a building to fall into disrepair. It is challenging to operate affordable housing. And so without training and without support, it can be very difficult for a co-op to sustain that. We think that the Community Land Trust should kind of provide that oversight and that support. It is an organization with expertise and with a commitment to the community that can help make sure the board is having elections every year and those elections are fair. They make sure that they're raising their rent every year instead of letting it sit for 20 years and then they have to do a huge jump. They are making sure that kind of good building practices are in place so that the building is well stewarded for the long term. So our current pipeline, again, is that one new construction project, 2 preservation projects that are going to join the Community Land Trust and hopefully complete a conversion to cooperative ownership. And then I'll share also that we're working in a portfolio that's primarily in Community Board 6 of 46 distressed buildings, right? They were owned by a nonprofit and that nonprofit kind of ceased to function. Its board quit or something. And the buildings fell into disrepair. They had 5 management companies in 5 years. And we now want to make sure that whatever happens next for those 46 buildings, 1,200 units, the tenants have a say in that. So we helped form a leadership team among the residents. And that leadership team is now negotiating with the ownership and with the management to see, can any of these buildings become co-ops? Can any of these buildings or can all of these buildings join the Community Land Trust so we know that they will be stewarded? Or if that's not possible for whatever reason, can we at least have a tenant association so that we have a body of residents who are well trained and know what's going on in our building and can engage with the management? So hopefully what you're hearing is that there's a variety of possible outcomes, but the goal is to be able to do any kind of renovation that needs to be done, right? Rehabilitate the building to actually get it in good condition. Do the kind of governance intervention that also has to happen, right? Oftentimes boards have ceased to function and it's just one person running the building. And even if that person is doing their best, that's a real struggle. So intervening in those things, recruiting additional leaders, training people on what does it take to run a building? How do you read a budget? How do you conduct outreach with your neighbors? When people fall behind on their rent, what are your options besides just sending them to housing court so that you can actually provide support to people? This is how we kind of make real the idea that this housing should be run differently. It should be run as though housing is a human right and not, something to profit off of. So that's an overview. Just to clarify, like our Bronx would be the developer on any project. So if we're doing a renovation, if we're building a new building, our Bronx is the developer. And then the Bronx Community Land Trust owns the land once that work is done. It's what we call the steward or the monitor. It provides that kind of ongoing support. Just to clarify the different roles. So that's the general background. Are there any questions first about that? Or would you rather I dive in and then we can do questions later?
I love it either way. Rashida, do you have
Let's stop for questions because that was a lot.
I think this is awesome. So I'm so glad that you guys are doing the work. It's why we in the housing committee been really interested in wanting to understand like how we can mobilize CB8 to kind of, follow suit, right? And so like how do we extend the portfolio in what's happening in CBA, what land is available, and how does so maybe the first question could be is how does the community land trust get a ground lease?
Yeah.
Like that, like the first step where it's like, hey, we can kind of scout the CB8 and say all these areas would be a good candidate for CLT. Like how does that start? Like do you get support from agencies or elected officials? Right, like that's one question. And then I'm interested to understand more of like your programming in terms of like once you guys do the turnover and it does become tenant owned, like is it something like quarterly that you do? You certify leadership, right? And that's what qualifies them, so two things, like, so just kind of like walk us through like beginning to
How do we get a project? And
Yeah,
then
exactly.
Totally. And I'd say there's kind of like two different pathways, right? There's the doing new construction on a vacant lot or, on an acquired lot with a demolition. And then there's the preserving existing affordable housing. So I'll speak to them separately, although they are funded kind of similarly. On the new construction piece, the sites that we did, our one new construction project is over 4 sites in Community Board 6. Those were the result of an analysis we did in 2020 and we had worked with, I think like a consulting development firm that helped us analyze what are the lots around our catchment area that are well suited for development, that are currently vacant or have an abandoned structure on them, that are zoned in such a way that you can build enough on them under the existing zoning in order to like operate sustainable housing there. And that analysis resulted in, I think initially it was like 23 properties that we focused on. And we took that list to HPD, to the city's housing agency, and we talked it through with them. And what we found was that for a very significant number of them, there actually already was some plan in place. The city had already been either in negotiations or had actually even committed the land to someone that just hadn't been transferred yet. It was something we couldn't see, but was in the works. That narrowed it down to a pretty small batch of lots where we held rallies at them and we had community members come out and we painted a big mural that said, what if community owned this? When we asked people, what would you put here? What does your neighborhood need? And, people overwhelmingly say a lot of the same things. We need space for youth and seniors. We need mental health and physical health care. We need dentist's office. Like we don't need another smoke shop or another fast food restaurant. So that organizing was able to create enough pressure that the city committed to actually, those lots had been previously allocated to another developer and they reallocated those to us. And the developer was actually totally fine with that. They didn't want the lots anyway. They didn't want to do anything with them. They were too small and kind of awkwardly shaped that they're difficult to develop on. So in that case, we were able to start an organizing campaign in partnership with like the technical assistance to identify what are the lots. I think fortunately, since we did that in 2020, the public analysis around vacant lots has come a long way. There's been a lot of discussion around how can we use our public land for something that serves the community. So I think there's much more kind of just rigorous data out there and information about what lots are available. I know that I think it was the Furman Center that published that big map of the different, it was like currently vacant lots, like lots that are owned by a different administrative body. Anyway, it was like a really cool interactive map of this kind of thing. That has been a focus and again remains a focus. We did just apply for the Neighborhood Builders RFQ, the Neighborhood Builders Fast Track RFQ, so that when vacant sites, which are developable, come up, when the city is looking for someone, we want to be positioned to take on those sites because we believe with our relationships to the community, with our ability to do organizing, and with our ability to bring in a lot of public subsidy. I mean, the answer kind of to your second question, how do we do it? Yes, we get really creative with financing. On these projects, we have ResOA discretionary capital from the current city council member, the former city council member, the former borough president, the current, we work aggressively to raise public capital. And then we also have a lot of like philanthropy and private foundation relationships that help us draw on that capital as well. That's a lot of our kind of operating capital. Like my salary comes from private philanthropy. And then the projects tend to get built using city and state dollars, a combination of city and state dollars. And then another thing to mention is that each of our projects we're doing in partnership with an affordable housing developer. So we know that we are new to the developer space and we do not have deep pockets like some of the other developers do. We don't have a balance sheet or a portfolio of 6,000 units that we can go and borrow money on. So we typically have to to partner with a more experienced developer when we want to do this development. And so we also rely on, frankly, their pocketbook to help fund the deal. And we believe that we're a real value add to them because they gain that strong relationship with the community, with that access to public capital, and frankly, with doing the right thing, which is occasionally appealing to developers, which is great. How do we get the properties? The other version is preservation of doing rehabs on existing building, and those come to us through our organizing and through our relationships with elected officials and community boards like yours. So often someone comes to their community board or their assembly person and they say, we're having a terrible time in our building. The landlord isn't listening. We've been calling 311 and nothing's been happening. Like, you've probably heard this from dozens of different buildings. And we help those tenants form a tenant association, much like we did in kind of our traditional model of organizing. They can make demands from that landlord, but if enough of them want it, and if the landlord seems amenable and the right conditions are present, that campaign can be, we don't want you to repair our building, we want you to sell your building to us. Or we want the city to foreclose on this building because it's in such bad shape that it actually should be handed over to us. So the third-party transfer program is an example of how we get buildings. We work with those tenants to get the building entered into a program which transfers it to their ownership. You maybe saw in the mayor's housing plan that they are interested in starting this new lending program called Our Homes, I think it's called, which is for cooperative conversion of privately owned buildings. So that when we are organizing in a building and the tenants say, we're having a terrible time with our landlord, we want to own it, there will be an existing city program that they can use to borrow money to purchase and renovate that building. And, we would like to believe that some of our work over the last 5 years is part of what kind of laid the groundwork and demonstrated the viability of that model and resulted in that becoming a kind of a strategy the city is embracing. And then, so you asked, how does the CLT kind of support them once the governance is started? And just to be clear, none of our buildings have finished their conversion onto cooperative, but we are currently working with buildings that operate. This is going to get a little technical. They are rental buildings, but they are HDFCs, which means that the residents are the board of the entity that owns the building. They just don't own a personal stake in that. So it's not a cooperative because they aren't shareholders, but they are the president, secretary, treasurer of it is an HDFC that owns the building. So in those cases, there's two different buildings we work with where the residents were effectively operating their own building. But in both cases, it had fallen to 1 to 2 households. There was a great deal of tension and zero transparency, and people had kind of lost faith in the operation of their building. And those buildings both wound up on the lien sale list and were going to be sold in the tax lien sale. We were able to intervene. We were able to, oh, I can see, yes, it looks like you've got someone in the waiting room. We were able to rewrite their bylaws, hold trainings, get a new board elected. So like a representative board of not one person, but like 5 to 7 households represented. And we conduct monthly meetings with those boards. We act as a liaison between those boards and their property management company to help them advocate to their property management about how their building should be run. We are required to host an annual meeting when we share finances out with the entire residency or with the entire tenant population. And we hold an election for the board members. Those board members are all on a leadership development plan, which means that they have said, yes, I commit to learning things like how to read our budget, but also how to run a meeting effectively, how to deal with conflict when it comes up between me and my neighbors and things like that. So we are training the kind of hard skills and soft skills that it takes to run a building with your neighbors. As we expand this work, as the Bronx CLT grows, we're going to build an ecosystem of those different co-ops who can actually do that together, right? And they can begin to do shared purchasing, right? We all need salt for the winter, but instead of 10 different buildings ordering salt, let's make a bulk order of salt under the Community Land Trust and just split it up among our buildings for cheaper. So one of our goals as the Community Land Trust grow is to use the kind of economy of scale. Another thing is, you probably heard that property insurance is doubled in the last 5 years. It's wildly expensive, and it's one of the things really driving up the cost of running a building. One of our goals is to use the CLT to pool insurance and make it cheaper for each building because they are a part of the Community Land Trust's pooled insurance. So there's different ways that we can use our kind of scale to both kind of support the autonomy of each individual building, but allow them to learn from one another, to share lessons with one another, to do joint purchasing with one another, and things like that.
Good.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm saying there was a lot of good information.
Yeah.
I'm taking note. I'm glad this is being recorded.
Yes. And if questions come up afterwards, I'm always happy to answer those over email, on the phone. I'll come back for another meeting. It just so happens that I haven't had a project that brings me in front of your community board about a specific thing. So I'm glad we're having this conversation now, so that when we do, there'll be some familiarity.
No, this definitely, because even, of course, this is for the community board, because we can reach a bunch of different people in the community. Granted, I mean, provided that they actually, get to watch the video and what have you. But it doesn't mean that we can't ask questions that might be beneficial to each of us here. So with that being said, I was taking the notes as well, and so you might have actually spoken to this, but as you were talking, it made me think about how there's a lot of development going on in Community Board 8, and I'm pretty sure across the board, but I'm just going to speak for CBA. Sometimes we'll get the notices after the fact that all these buildings are going up. Is there, since this is your field, so to speak, I guess, not that you're with those developers, but since this is like within your,
It's okay. I have to deal with the going to bed at night knowing I'm a landlord. So I get it.
Do you collaborate and to like proactively try to collaborate with those developers, like some of the people, or I don't know the developers. I know like Corcoran and people like that, but
Yeah, I would say no, frankly, we don't. Like we really operate off of specific partnerships. So the two projects, or the two different partners that we work with at present, are, one is Habitat for Humanity of New York City and Westchester County, and who has a really, I think, strong track record of developing affordable housing, particularly of developing homeownership opportunities. And so they've got a lot of experience in the co-op world. And then the other is Lemley and Wolf, which is an affordable housing developer you may have heard of, that is a developer and property manager who we connected with actually because of just relationships between some of our staff members and some of their staff members. But those relationships kind of facilitated the dialogue that allowed us to get into the specifics and say, okay, we're going to want to do XYZ with this project. We're always going to be prioritizing stability and affordability over developer fees or profit or any of those things. Are you okay with that? And really kind of test the alignment of our relationship. And that is what kind of builds the trust for us to work with them. But we are quite picky about who we would partner with because we don't want to be driving ourselves crazy trying to fight them over every little detail in the project. So, but in terms of like how do we monitor what's happening and how do we become aware? So we rely a lot on referrals from the community boards and from elected offices, constituent services at the like assembly member, council member offices. Those are really useful to us. We also have a data and research analyst who uses publicly available data to kind of make these assessments. So tracking where there are foreclosures, because foreclosure filings are public information, and we know buildings in foreclosure are probably at risk. Those are ones where, there could be a transfer of ownership where someone is buying it that could be at risk for flipping, where prices are going to go up dramatically quickly. So we also use public data to help us target. We also look at like what buildings have a lot of violations, and then we go do outreach in that building and say, do you feel like you might want a tenant association? And if there's interest and the tenants kind of buy into that, then we will work with that building. The other piece, I saw it later in the agenda, but is the way that the Community Opportunity to Purchase Act will affect all this. So we have been fighting for the Community Opportunity to Purchase Act. Our Bronx has been a supporter for several years, and we are excited that, we really believe we will pass this bill this year. I think likely in September or October. And so we're thinking a lot about how do we know which buildings are going to be coming up for COPA based on the eligibility? And we already have an assessment by community board. So I could show you, actually, let me see if I can pull this up really quickly.
Do you need me to share the screen? Is that something where you need the screen to be shared?
I would, if that's okay.
Let me see.
Let me see if this works.
No,
Okay, sent a request.
Okay, that's better.
It's not, it'll be brief because it's going to look like just a bunch of numbers on a page. But this is our assessment of which buildings would be eligible for COPA right now in your district. This is just an example because I think we're still in the process of fleshing out this analysis. But this is a way of saying like, okay, we know the addresses of the 17 buildings in Community Board 8 that are likely to be eligible for COPA if they come up for a sale in the next couple of years. So those are on our radar, and we can try to have a kind of initial kind of baseline of information about them available already so that by the time they come up for sale, we would already be in position. The other piece about, I'll say COPA for the Community Opportunity to Purchase Act, COPA requires very short timelines. So you have to put in an offer. You have ultimately 90 days to reach an agreement, which is very fast. For that to work, the building really already needs to be organized. There already needs to be a tenant, because we don't want to go into a building where tenants don't know who we are. They don't know us from, any other developer, and they aren't interested in us. We want to work in buildings where tenants want us to be there. So we do now outreach in these buildings and say, would you like to form a tenant association? Do you know about COPA or what that is? And do you know that you may be eligible for COPA if your landlord sells the building? So that we can have, again, the kind of groundwork in place if those ever come up for sale. Or theoretically, you can organize and pressure the landlord to sell.
I love that. Thank you for sharing. And you had mentioned there's an interactive map as well, right?
Yeah, the interactive map was the Furman Center's map of, are folks, you're familiar with the Furman Center? This is a
Mm.
institution that does research on housing in New York City. So I will give you a link.
If we don't have a chat, then we can definitely
Yeah,
share.
we can follow up with it
Oh,
too.
got it. Yeah, well,
Hmm.
it's just furmancenter.org, Furman. They have a lot of really valuable data resources on there. Like you can look up a map of all of the subsidized housing in New York City. So like any housing that got a tax abatement, 421A, or any of these things, it's tracked there. Another one is a map of lots, like lots that publicly owned lots that may be suitable for development. And those are the kind
Right.
of resources that we use to to map out where we should be doing our outreach.
Which
How can we collaborate, right, with CLT, our Bronx, in these 17 properties that will be eligible? Like what's something that it would be helpful to some of these goals?
Yeah, I think I mean one thing the community board can do is just to be a trusted validator, right? Members of community board 8 know who you all are. They may not know who we are. And so if we go to their building and say, we should form a tenant association, and they go to you guys and say, who's this Our Bronx people? They told us they want to help us buy our building. Just you all knowing who we are and what we do, and hopefully that we're, a legit group helps to validate that because it does require people to buy into a big change quickly. And so having multiple trusted stakeholders kind of all rowing in one direction is really valuable. That's also true, frankly, for getting capital, for getting subsidy behind it is if we can say, the residents of X building want to do it. Our Bronx is there to support them. The community board supports this project as well and is like ready to be an ally as well. It just really kind of focuses on the best possible outcome, and that makes it harder for some kind of like shady actor to come in, try to buy the building. Honestly, when there's eyes on a building, when the city is paying attention, that's when bad actors stay away because they don't want eyes on what they do. So that's one way is we draw attention to situations that need attention, and we can do that together, I think, with your outreach. We also do a lot of kind of like resource distribution. So I'll give you an example right now. We are having an event on Thursday in the backyard at our office where we will be meeting with 1 to 4 family homeowners who need home repair grants. So there will be a group called Rebuilding Together New York City joining us. They operate actually, yeah, this is a great one to look up. And I can send the flyer afterwards, but Rebuilding Together NYC has a targeted Bronx home improvement program, and certain zip codes in the Bronx are eligible for these grants. And there's $4 million available in home repair grants that they are desperate to give away to people in these zip codes. So, using the community board's outreach to inform people that there is this grant funding available, and if you're interested in applying, you can go to the Our Bronx office on Thursday the 25th from 2 to 7 to learn more and to apply. If you're interested, reach out to Todd, and then I'll tell them what documents to bring, and they'll be on their way. So, using your outreach capacity is really helpful. When we try to pursue legislation that supports our work, we will often look to community boards for support. So we will look for resolutions of support around things like COPA. And then another one is this, or have you all heard about the Safer Homes Act? This is a bill being introduced by Pierina Sanchez. And it is basically a new reformed and improved version of the third-party transfer program, which I referenced earlier. So it's a program that would target the worst of the worst landlords, take their properties away from them, and even facilitate those buildings going either to a good new owner or to the tenants themselves. So we will be advocating for Safer Homes Act, and we will, ask for you all to support that if you think that's something that would be good for your community. So supporting legislation, doing outreach, making referrals when you are aware of tenants in buildings that are having trouble, or this single family homeowner really needs help. Can the CLT support her? Then we want to reach out to those people. Also kind of identifying institutions where we should be doing outreach, helping us understand like, oh, well, if you want to reach people, you need to go to whatever, such and such church at their afternoon meeting, like that's when you're really going to get to people. Or you guys know your community better than we do, and you can help us understand what the best opportunities are for us to do outreach and make people aware of this model. When you guys are having resource fairs, we want to be there, you know.
And you offer multilingual services as well, right?
We do, yeah. About a majority of our team is fluent in Spanish, and we use interpreters at all of our in-person events. Other languages are available as needed, though, like Spanish is typically the other language that is just by default available.
Thank you.
Luckily for us, with respect to getting this particular message out, almost immediately, said on Wednesday, we have a full board meeting. And so, housing, since the housing meeting is the last Monday of the month, when I give my report, if I have the flyers or the information, I could always.
You bet.
So that would be Wednesday. That way, if people want to go on Thursday.
Perfect. That's amazing. That's great. I will send you guys that flyer right after this meeting.
I'll send a flyer to the community board earlier
Great.
so that they can spread the right message. And also to the point of, you mentioned we can support through legislation or making referrals or doing outreach. We do have a housing resource guide. So one of our goals is to go through the guide.
Oh, that's great.
Since the name has changed, of course, that will be a definite, like.
There we go. Yeah.
Affirmation,
Yeah.
and we can put those links that you mentioned that could possibly
Totally.
help people.
Absolutely.
I think funny enough, so you answered like the questions. You didn't necessarily say, okay, this
Not
is
in order, but yeah.
answering, but you
Those
did
were,
do-
I mean, and I just want to, and I don't mean for this to sound patronizing at all, but those are just excellent questions, right? Like you should be asking every developer who wants to work in your community those questions, because if they don't have good answers, they don't deserve to work with your neighbors. So I really give you guys a lot of kudos for digging into it.
No, and thank you for agreeing to speak with us. You mentioned, I know you do a lot of outreach, and you work with single family homes, 4-family home, co-op people looking to move from wherever they are to a cooperative, possibly.
Yeah, more trying to do something in their own building. The dream is, folks who want to organize their own building. But also if folks are just interested in this, some folks come to our meetings not because of their own building, but because they just care about what's being developed in the Bronx and they want it to be affordable to Bronx residents. So, people who are passionate about community-driven development, I think we'd love to be connected with them.
So I'm
Especially young people.
Exactly. Which we actually did have some college students come speak at our last meeting, and
Cool.
Their organization is called Civic Reset, and they were looking like their whole story. You could go to their website, but they were looking for affordable homes, affordable apartments.
Yeah.
Find that, so they started this
Yeah.
organization. But with respect to you doing outreach and speaking to people in the community, would you be open to, I know there are pre-existing co-ops, but would you be open to speaking to co-op?
Absolutely.
Boards and things?
Yeah, so we can also connect with existing co-ops and talk to them about how we can help them deal with any issues that they're facing. Our capacity is limited. We are a small nonprofit, so I don't want to overpromise that like anyone who comes to speak with us, we can start a tenant association with them that month or whatever, but we do make our best effort to be available to folks, and certainly to like have a conversation and offer advice based on what we've seen, or refer them out to other folks where that's appropriate. Or so, we're eager to talk to anybody who is looking for support in responsibly running their own housing.
I know a couple of people maybe joined after, so I don't know if anyone online has any particular questions, or if you just joined in to hear. But also, you can also ask any questions that I think I see one hand. It might be Jessica.
It is me. I want to be respectful if anybody else wants to have questions after me. I was interested in, speaking on capacity, right? So the Bronx has been so under-researched for so long. Uh, I'm interested to know where it's like how you guys incentivize to scale services yourselves, right? What does that
Yeah.
look like? Is it you give a report and, agencies or these private philanthropies, like how does that work, right?
Yeah, you're asking all the right questions because we just, I mean, so as part of our rebrand as going from the Northwest Bronx Community and Clergy Coalition to Our Bronx was going Bronx wide, dramatically scaling up from serving one quadrant of the Bronx to serving the whole thing. And of course, that doesn't happen overnight. And some of our work, for example, the Bronx Community Land Trust has always been eligible to serve the whole Bronx. We are careful not to step on the toes because there's also another community land trust in the South Bronx. There's actually two different community land trusts in the South Bronx. Um, in our health organizing, for example, is mostly focused on state legislatures. So that's always been Bronx wide. But our housing was really focused, and that part, it really relies again on partnership heavily with other Bronx organizations. So we are in something called the Bronx Wide Coalition. And this is a coalition of I want to say 13 to 15 organizations in the Bronx that like are similarly aligned on this vision for community ownership of a variety of assets. We want of our housing, of our businesses, of our transit, of all these things. Um, we do a lot of our work to serve the entire Bronx in coalition with them. And we are working on something right now called a comprehensive economic development strategy, which is like a regional economic development plan for the entire Bronx. And I mean, the Bronx is 1.5 million people. I forget exactly, it's like bigger than Dallas and Pittsburgh. Like it's bigger than a lot of major cities that have whole economic development plans. So we want one for the Bronx, and we want one that the people of the Bronx are invested in and feel bought into. And so that is a way that we are partnering with, these 14 other organizations to come together, draft this 30-year vision for economic development that is based in racial justice, that is based in economic democracy and cooperative economics, and advance that for the whole borough. We scale up as an organization by, 5 years ago, we had one project, and it was part of how we tested out this model, and now we have three, and they're a little bit different in the pipeline. And the goal is to have in the next 5 years, 8 to 10 more, which is just kind of the scaling that we assessed to be feasible and ambitious, but not so much so that it, really dilutes or compromises what we're doing. But that relies on a big crux of that is the funding piece. And how you make that possible, I just came from an event where we basically were presenting to a room. It was at the Federal Reserve downtown where all the gold lives. It was like the fanciest room I've been in New York City. And we were presenting to a bunch of bankers about this model and basically saying, this is a real thing. This is not an experiment anymore. This is a legit solution for affordable housing in New York City that you should be investing in a major way. No longer is this like, oh, your little like community development team gives us a donation of 100,000. Like we want real loans from the lending team of 12 million at 2% interest. We want real deal money, basically. Then that's part of how we scale is like we get increasingly mainstream sources of money to become more familiar with this model. We slowly prove the validity and the value of this model, and they become more invested.
Right, because it's a strategy now. Exactly. So,
Yeah.
can be
And,
repeated.
to talk about scale, like 10 years ago, there were two community land trusts in New York City. Today, there's over 20. They're in every borough in the city. They represent like many different neighborhoods. And so that is really demonstrating, again, like this is a real approach. Is it going to solve the housing crisis on its own? No, but it's one tool in our toolbox.
Speaking of housing crisis, I'm going to go to one of the questions because it came up. I know it's something, the city of Yes.
Oh yeah.
We were opposed to it as a community board. And I know,
Yeah.
the last organization that spoke, they spoke about this, about the the high density building, like buildings in those, high density, I want to get this correct. Sorry. So basically, the question speaks to how will you scale housing in CDA without relying
Yeah.
on density overrides? Because we're against that, taking like CDA,
Totally.
taking these buildings. With the civic reset, they actually were for that. But they're still learning. They said they're open to learning, but so how do you see like our Bronx fitting into that? So,
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. I think because a lot of the reason that we do this CLT work and this development work, what we call community-driven development, is that like the old kind of false binary that, well, like the cities wants you to build and communities just don't want anything. Like it wasn't serving anyone. And increasingly with things like City of Yes and with that ballot initiative we saw, the city's approach to the housing crisis is just to have more top-down power to build housing. It's like, well, we're gonna give ourselves more and more authorities to tell you what housing you're gonna have in your district, which you can whatever is one way to deal with the supply issue, and there is a real supply issue. But when communities feel that they have a seat at the table, they actually welcome development. They just have opinions about how it happens, right? They just want to see development that actually serves the existing district, that doesn't completely disregard neighborhood character and like that, all of those things. So my hope and our vision in part is that the community land trust in this kind of development is actually a way to get people to have a seat at the table and embrace appropriate development for their districts, and to kind of manage that tension between like top down and community, the like the city says yes and the community says no thing, is what are the opportunities where the community wants something. And yeah, we know that the Community Land Trust is committed to providing, there's a ground floor commercial space, and they've talked about how they're committed to providing some kind of community facility that we want, like youth space or senior space. So like we actually embrace this particular development with a ground floor commercial because we believe in the value of what's going to be there. With the kind of piece about like zoning overlays or requesting rezonings or anything like that. We do not want to pursue projects that are going to require that kind of thing to be feasible. That's a part of this kind of initial assessment. The feasibility of like which sites are good sites are ones where you don't have to do something that's completely out of touch with the community. I'm not going to pretend that the economic constraints of development, like that we're totally free from them. So there's a good chance that if we bring you a new construction project, it's not going to have any parking in it. And you guys may not like that. I don't know how your particular community board feels, but many community boards are really frustrated with the lack of parking options in developments because they have people who have cars. And it's simply at least on the project, the one new construction we're doing, it's just not possible for us to have parking in there and deliver affordability and also, rely on public subsidy. So we'll be really transparent. I mean, I can offer that like we will be much more willing to open the books than your typical developer is, to say like, well, let's really look at it. Like, let's look at what's possible, because we are also committed to delivering the deepest affordability and the best amenities possible. But if a site can't have parking and we do our due diligence and determine it can't have parking, then we're going to determine it can't have parking. So again, I won't pretend there's never going to be a time when what suits the project is like maybe not the absolute dream of the strictest members of the community board, but we will really do our best to engage well before a project and only even pursue it if it's something, again, that the community wants. That the whole point of the community-driven development is to deliver things that are being demanded by the community, not things that are demanded plus 7 more stories on top of them to, whatever. So
makes sense. I mean, even within the community board, we vote on you vote on issues and you don't always get a majority.
Totally.
Or
Totally.
you might get a majority, but majority could mean that 60% said yes and 40% said no.
Yeah. Yeah. And as I'm sure you guys know, we don't have ultimate say on everything. If we need to use the city's money, one of my partners says, the man with the gold makes the rules and the city has all the gold. So, if they say no parking on the project, or we are not giving you the vast majority of your money, then that is what it is. But again, I like to think that we have actually more ability because we have credibility as a community partner. Like we actually have a stronger ability to push back on those kinds of things than your typical developer does, who is just going to be seen as like probably just trying to make more profit out of the situation. Yeah.
I know Jessica had another question. That's a new hand, I believe.
That is a new hand. I wanted to elaborate more on this community driven, like what the community wants, right?
Yeah.
How involved do you guys get with the design of the building, and whether or not you incorporate sustainable systems into the project, say like green roofs or solar PV, or right now just taking electrification or all these things. How do you guys work or collaborate with agencies to like incorporate a lot of that into the design of the building, because it's community driven, right? Like no trees, like the not enough trees, right? In some districts of the Bronx. How do we counteract that now that it's a little bit too late? So
yeah, that is why our Bronx like wants to be part of the development. There are some CLTs who we go on the back end. We're not a part of the front end. We do what we can on the back end, but as you guys probably know, so much of the affordability, the design, all that stuff is baked in at the beginning. And so if you don't have a seat at the table for the development, the pre-development, you're not able to have input on those things. So that is why we are also a developer and try to have, a meaningful stake in each project. I'll tell you, like in our first, well, I probably shouldn't share these numbers, but we have a growing percentage of each deal that is our stake so that we can exert more control over it, and do those kinds of things. Those are always a multi-stakeholder conversation. It's us and it's the other development partner, because again, we have to typically work with somebody else, and we have to work with the architect, who is the one who actually tells you, like, here's what's possible in terms of using mass timber, or here's how much lighting you can incorporate, whatever, all those things. We will always push very strongly for the maximum of those things, and of two things in particular. One, of environmental sustainability. One, because it's the right thing to do in terms of preserving the earth and all of our future generations still having resources. But two, because it's cost effective. It's how you invest at the beginning and it saves you month after month, right? When you build a building at Passive House standards, you have vastly reduced your utility bill for decades to come. And so we just think it's good development sense to shoot for very high sustainability standards at the beginning of a project. The other thing is, a lot of affordable housing organizations, they just do housing, right? We just build housing and we want to make that housing as cheap as possible, which is good. But one of the ways they achieve that is we want to pay as little as possible on this project. And since our organization is also concerned with workforce development and economic development, we really prioritize like paying a living wage to all of the people employed on a project. So we will push for union labor or prevailing wage labor in every part of a project where feasible. To the extent that our development partners are actually like super annoyed with us at voluntarily increasing our own costs, because we think like if you're not making enough, you can't pay your rent. You don't get to just ignore half of the equation, right? If the rent is affordable, that's about you also earn enough money to pay that rent. And the building needs to bring in enough revenue to support the building. So another piece I'll just touch on quickly is like one thing the Community Land Trust can do, and that is a benefit of our Bronx being involved with the project, is folding in some of that additional workforce support. So for example, because we're a part of this Kingsbridge Armory negotiation, we negotiated local hiring would be a part of the community benefits agreement. when that happens, typically the developers say, sure, the laborers can be local, but the foreman, he's going to come from Long Island because no one local has the skill for that job. Well, so what we're doing is making sure that Bronx residents are getting into training programs now so that when construction starts on the Kingsbridge Armory, they have all the skills they need for all of these high value positions. That we do through our connections with labor and with workforce development organizations. We get people into apprenticeship programs and training programs and worker co-ops. And we can do that in our buildings, right? So when tenants are struggling to pay rent, I go to their apartment and I sit down on their couch with them and I say, what kind of work were you doing before? And is that the kind of work you want to do now? And what kind of training would it take for you to get a job in that field? And can we look up those training opportunities together? So, what part of our organizing support is this additional workforce piece. And also, or in many cases, it's like, I used to be able to work. I'm now disabled. I'm now a senior. I'm not able to work now. Like, okay, then we need to go help you apply for SCREE or DREE or whatever, public benefit is available to your household is suitable for you. So one of the things we offer is having that knowledge and doing that outreach because you can do everything over here on the keeping your costs down side, but if your tenants just don't earn any money, they can't pay their rent.
Thank you for breaking it up like that because a lot of people feel like it's a catch-22,
Yeah.
right? We're almost overpaying for, projects that should be very simple and are very simple in other states, but being that we're New York City and it's so expensive to survive here, right?
Yeah.
We make sure that New Yorkers that are helping New York be better can earn a New York living wage.
And like, listen, the lawyers are making a living wage, the architect's making a living wage. Like, why should the laborers not be making a living wage? So we already pay everybody else perfectly well. Like, so yeah, we kind of reject the idea that affordability of housing should be premised on your laborers not earning enough.
We can all win.
Yeah, the pie is big enough. We just like need to allocate the pie to the right things.
Exactly. Before we do anything else, I would like to ask if anyone has any questions. Anyone besides Jessica or myself, EP, Shahada, Clifton, is that it? Clifton?
Yes.
Any
Or just
questions?
any reactions. Like, it doesn't have to be a question. I'm also just curious to see how this lands for you all.
Questions, comments, reactions? We just take it all in.
We also have some guests, right, in the call that may want to speak.
Yes. I see an EP and Shahada. Going once. Going twice. I mean, the good thing is this is recorded, and after this, I'll type up the minutes, but also the recording will be attached, which will also include the links that you send. So it's not going to be immediately because obviously we have
No
to
problem.
record it, but it usually
Yep.
goes out.
And
if anyone has any
who,
questions or comments afterwards, they can still reach out to the community board or to you.
please, who should I email those to directly? Let's see,
You can send it to the same email.
that
I mean,
reached that
you
perfect.
saw RXH, or whatever the original email, you can send it to all of us. It doesn't. Do you have any comments or questions or anything for us?
No, I mean, I'm glad that we touched on City of Yes and also the ballot initiative because I'm just curious how community boards are feeling about their opportunities for providing input on a project right now, or about kind of how the dynamic has changed with projects in your area. But so I guess if you just have any high level thoughts about that, I'd be curious to hear them.
I
Or
mean,
maybe it's like kind of waiting for it to play out. I don't know yet, but
yeah, I mean, I can share just like takeaways from a lot of the conversations before, like it passed, right? Our district is a special natural area district, and there was a huge sentiment about that that being threatened, right? With the ULURP going away, and are our trees, our greatest elders in our community now threatened with overdevelopment and lack of zoning or lack of community input with regards to what's being built in the community was a big deal. One of the pride and joys of CB8 is, our shade, right? Is the fact
Lush.
that,
Mhm.
yeah. So that's really, really important to this community. And it's such a part of the character of the community as well. So it's just like, how do we control the monster that could be City of Yes? And elected officials just wanting to play this as a numbers game, right? Where it's just like,
Yeah.
we just need a
Just gotta hit the goal and check the
yes,
box.
exactly. Check the box.
200,000 units. Yeah.
That's it, right? Like, they don't care if it's micro units of 100 square feet, they care. They don't care if there's a laundry room. They don't care if there's childcare. They don't care if, how the rest of the city services are reacting to the overdevelopment of housing without that, right? And I want to say that was like a big, that is a big fear right now still, in the community. Like right now, we have a working task group with regards to the overdevelopment of like Concourse Village, right? Van Cortlandt Village, right? Where there's still buildings that exist and people that are living amongst these lots that are being developed, and they can't get to their own car, or they can't park on their own block, or their water is getting,
They're just like
rated.
casualties of development. It's just like, they're
Right.
collateral damage. Yeah.
And so now, like, you have these people that are all of a sudden in this massive construction zone, right? And they didn't have a choice, right? So how does that get managed? And this is now like the first instance of evaluating how do we help that community, because it's kind of that catch-22 where it's just like, we need the development, right? We need the housing,
Yeah.
but like, you're surrounding people that have house, and like, now are suffering from the over construction in a
Yeah.
specific area at the same, like, seriously, right? So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so much of it is just about how do you make sure the existing community benefits from that development, not it shouldn't there
Suffer.
it doesn't yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, that's a shame. But yeah, that makes sense.
With, to your point about the conversations, that speaks to the housing, but then you have like other committees that, like the Economic Development Committee,
Yep.
or different committees that can see some value in this, because there was some, I know back in the day, they said some of these laws that were put into place were when we were like a port city, so you couldn't have certain. I mean, I wasn't around during that time.
Yeah. Yeah, me neither.
Exactly, but there are some restrictions on what could be a business, like you couldn't have
Interesting.
a home business because of X, Y,
Yeah.
and Z. But after
Yeah.
that, a lot of people were doing things in their homes, so that like maybe whether it be baking or doing hair or whatever it was,
Totally.
sort of
Totally.
like opportunities to continue that, but there were no laws in place yet, and so
The
the city
regulatory framework couldn't catch up in time for them. Yeah,
exactly.
totally. Totally.
But it was kind of like you want people to be able to support themselves economically, but let's say you do have this business at home, are you going to make sure that the supplies, like the environment is safe in terms of like the chemicals that are being used,
Right.
all of that? So we have heard all of these conversations.
Yeah, there's a lot to balance.
It is a lot to balance, and I think at the end of the day, we would like to say that everyone wants everyone else to be safe and to have a place to live, but it's just how does that play out? Like, I want you to have a place to live, and I want you to be safe, but I want to be safe as well.
Yeah,
There's
and
a bunch of things that came up.
you make trade-offs between the tenants of today and the tenants of tomorrow, and who those are. So, yeah, I know what you mean.
We had a lot of long conversations.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and you all, I imagine, have some particular there are dynamics in CB8 that are distinct to your community board and probably are not at play anywhere else in the city, or not quite the same way. So I'm sure that that was a lot to manage.
Definitely.
I've taken a lot more than the 10 minutes you asked for, Jessica. I'm sorry.
No, I wanted 10-minute intervals and you
I got
did
you. I got you.
amazing, right?
Okay.
I wanted it to feel like a conversation more than a lecture.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
you realized that perfect.
I'm sorry I don't have
Thank
a
you so
slideshow, but I think it's better for that anyway.
This is excellent. This is thank you for taking time. I know the invitation came kind of last minute,
It's all
so
good. This is
I
great.
totally appreciate you
I have been
coming
meaning to
in.
do this as well, so this is perfect.
Great. So, I mean, I'm like, we'd love to invite you again, right? Like, next,
For sure.
down in the next when the
Please.
season gets
Yep.
back, right?
Yep.
Actually around like specific C properties that, interest works around. We also have a land use committee, right? And see how we can collaborate with them with regard,
Yep.
in this
Yep.
regard.
Totally.
So
I would love
we
to
just
loop
want
in our data and research person for that, because I think she'll be able to kind of pull together a lot of really good info that both groups would really appreciate hearing. But I'd love to do that.
That
Okay.
sounds great. So thank you, Todd, so much.
Thank you all. It's been a pleasure.
You'll hear from us again.
Perfect. Yeah, I will go ahead and email some of those resources now, okay?
No problem. Thank you so
All
much.
right. Take care, folks.
Thank you, Todd. Have a great summer.
You too.
Bye.
So thank you. So that was basically agenda item 4 and 5. So we are going to move to the chair's report now. It's pretty straightforward. I actually thought this was interesting. And I will link this in our minutes, but I came across an article regarding the Centro Maria residence in Spiden, Dyville. It's a boarding house run by Catholic nuns. The residence hosts 22 women at roughly $210 per week for a single room and $190 per week for a shared room. The residence serves as an economically viable alternative to the expensive rents that young adults might not be able to afford. With our average rents in New York being over $4,000, and in the Bronx they're roughly a little over $1,600. So the residence members, this is an opportunity for them to to be able to afford to live in New York and also build community. So I just thought this was like really interesting. I didn't know this existed. And basically I want to say maybe they're like college age students, so they might be the students who go to school here, like at College of Mount St. Vincent or wherever. But they do actually have to follow some of the rules. Like I think they have an 11:30 curfew on weekdays and a 12 o'clock curfew on weeknights. No boys or men are allowed after a certain time, but that's fine. They seem to enjoy this. The nuns actually have like like cook them breakfast, and they have like game nights and things like that. So I just thought this was like something interesting that people could be knowledgeable about, because apparently there are other boarding houses like this around the city, or people who might not be able to afford the rents. And I'm not sure how long term it is, but I did see something where there was a woman who had just recently lost her mother, and she was like mid-20s, but she was able to find a residence here and find community within like one of these. I don't know if it was this home, the Centro Maria residence, but I know there are a couple of others around the city that exist, and I figured I would put that link in there just in case there are people who would like, you know what, I'm not ready to move into an apartment by myself just yet, but I would still like to live in New York. So I was just like, oh, this is something that I didn't even know existed. And so that, yeah, I figured, take a look and see if, there's an interest. Maybe they actually have some that are maybe single sex and co-ed that I read about. So I thought that was like really cool. And other than that, old business, we would still like to review and update the resource guide. And as we get more guest speakers, we can continue to update. But I put the link in. The resource guide is a PDF, the link that I have, but we can look it over and decide later on what we will revise. And also we can work on the pawn card. And maybe have a guest speaker come in September, not September, but October, like October, November. Someone from maybe DHS, because that's basically what the pawn card is. They could possibly provide.
It's with them, absolutely.
Exactly. As far
We
as
should,
new
yeah.
business, oh yes, Jessica.
Yeah, we should mention the event on Thursday, right? That Todd is having with Rebuilding Together. I'm not sure if it's Rebuilding Together or that he's gonna have, yeah, this kind of shop with regards to getting 1 to 4 family homes grant money. Is similar to another organization that we had come talk. So, maybe just mentioning that. So if anybody wants to go, or have it on the radar for the full board meeting, new business. That's it.
No, I think that's one of the events that he said he would send in an email. And that's why I was like, it's perfect timing because we have the meeting on
Wednesday, right?
So that is on Thursday, but also we could possibly link that into our resource guide.
I heard it's gonna be in Wakefield.
You're talking to us?
I was
The
saying,
full board meeting is in Wave Hill. Yes,
Yes.
Wednesday. Thank you. Thank you for
It
that.
is
Okay.
Yeah. Any other questions or concerns about that was new business?
That was new business. That was new business.
New business. So any other questions, concerns?
Right now right now they're working on the new building on Broadway.
Okay, which building is
On
it?
the Broadway in 251st Street Broadway.
So it's a new building, like a brand new construction?
Yeah,
You said 251st in Broadway?
yeah, they are. Yes, they are. It used to be a picture shop. It used to be it used to be the cleaners, but that's no more. But not no more.
So they're working on a new construction that used to be a pizza shop?
Yeah.
Okay, we can look into that. Is it, I guess we can look into it.
It's a department, house department.
Okay, we can look it up. And, I don't know if it's similar to, if it concerns anything that Todd mentioned, or if it's like a brand new, we don't know, but it's something that we can look into. So you said it's a new construction on 251st Street in Broadway. There's a lot of new construction going on, to be quite honest. So, at least we have that on our radar. So thank you for that. And if there are no further questions, anyone want to?
Motion to adjourn.
I second that. I mean, it's just the two of
Thank
us.
you. Yeah. I mean, yeah, people are dropping. So thank you, Rashida, for hosting tonight, and thank you for a great housing community season. I continue to learn so much, and I'm looking forward to now that the mayor election season has gone, start drafting resolutions of one of our deliverables for the new season. That the timing, we can align better city. So yeah.
And thank you for your thoughtful questions and suggestions, because we work together as a team. So sometimes something might not be on my radar, and I'm glad that you put this on my radar, to invite the guest speaker from our Bronx / Community Land Trust. Or else it would.
My pleasure.
No.
Yeah, no, I think they're doing great work. I think this is something that we should have a strong presence at CBA of City of rezoning, hyper construction kind of bleeding into our district, without I think this is with their support and alignment, I think we could sure that we can protect affordable housing stock VA.
Exactly. You said it.
Thanks. All right. Well, have a night and get home safely. Stay dry, both of you.
Take care.
Bye.
You too.
Bye.
See you
Bye bye.
Wednesday with
See you
you.
Wednesday. No problem. Bye bye.
See you
Take
Wednesday.
care.
So big.